All right. Well, welcome to the Raised Hunting Podcast, and we're back with the two special guests, and they are as special as ever today, I promise you, is Warren Neaston. But Warren is about to read off a whole bunch of, you guys have done a phenomenal job of doing the reviews. We sure appreciate it. And same with the topics. We had more topics than we could actually come up with what we needed to do today. But we finally selected one. And that is going to be, we're going to talk about tree stand placement and how we choose those. But before we get into that, let's talk about who do we need to thank.
The Spotify guys are making sure they stay out in front. The iTunes, Apple people are like, they're coming from the back. They're like Seabiscuit, but they just aren't quite catching up yet. So so I think you guys have been doing such an awesome job. We might have to do another giveaway soon.
Okay.
But I'll have a much better way to do it this time. Hunt NC, thank you for the review. We will do southeast whitetail hunting at some point, but we're going to wait until we have somebody more educated on that topic. Dad is really the only one that could talk about it, and so he could speak to it, but we'll bring in Shane or somebody else, that maybe Mitch, someone else that has more experience there, and so that we can actually give you some substance on that, not just us BSing you. Troutman 28, you demand. Cody 8, 8-5.
Is that on Spotify?
D Hansen 18. No, you can't see him on Spotify, remember?
I was going to say that.
Nick Knott,
is
as
the one we're doing
always.
today.
And Maine Deer Hunter. And T Dave 1 2 3 4 4 5 6 7 7. You guys rock.
Heck yeah. We appreciate you guys. Who's the one we're doing today?
Troutman 28.
Troutman 28 gave us our topic for today. You the man. You rock.
Troutman 28.
All right. We ready?
We ready.
So it's, when we're recording this one, it's actually August 7th, 8th? 8th. August 8th. So I feel like this is pretty timely as far as starting to think about putting tree stands in.
Have we told people the topic?
Yeah, I did it before. Nick heard me.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't hear it either.
I think we discussed it. I don't think we told everybody else.
No, it's going to be about tree stand placement and how you choose. However, there's a new gig in town, so some of that kind of goes to its wayside, and that is, if you're doing the saddle thing, you're doing the hang and hunt stuff, you still got to choose the correct tree, but sometimes you're choosing it in the dark, which can be problematic.
Yeah,
I think it's problematic.
I think it is too.
Yeah, don't be giving me crap about debacle.
Problematic. I kind of like that, though. I thought it was kind of a cool word.
No,
it's a made-up word.
Yeah, it's a made-up word, but maybe I can get that in the dictionary. That's pretty good.
Okay, so where do we want to start with this? Because I think this is a really good question.
You can go anywhere with it.
I think let's go from your two perspective, because you guys do more setting stands, and I think that especially Iowa to me was quite a bit different than when we hunted in Montana, because correct me if I'm wrong, most places in Montana, we didn't necessarily lose the cover like we do here.
Well, the other thing in Montana was we had less trees, so you knew where your stands were going to go. I mean, when you're hunting a river bottom, you're hunting the river bottom, and a lot of times it choked down to where it was only
more funnels
50 to 75 yards wide. You put your stand in the center of it, you can cover the whole thing.
Yep.
But definitely, I guess when we started talking about this topic and doing it, I was like, I love the topic, but it's going to be hard because I don't think about what I'm doing. I look a lot of times at the terrain that I'm looking at, or I'm checking the wind, or I'm looking on OnX and I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, this matches. But it's not until you're standing there at the bottom of a tree that you're going, this is the right spot.
Well, I think there's two different ways that you end up hunting, because if you're hunting one particular deer, I think it definitely changes the way that you're approaching it.
Absolutely, 100%.
If you're just trying to kill a good deer, it changes the way that you approach it. So I think that there's kind of two different methods there on what you're doing.
Okay, so let's talk. So here, one thing that I can tell people that, especially for the gentleman that wrote in, one of the things that comes to me that I don't typically do, and that is we put in food plots. And so a lot of people put in food plots and then they sit on the edges of their food plots. We don't do that typically. We usually have ground blinds on the food plots, and then a lot of our stand locations are off the food plots, somewhere between bedding and that food. And I find that I tend to do that more often than not. I get tired of sitting on the edge of field edges and things like that where I see a lot of deer, but I don't necessarily have an opportunity to shoot those deer. So what I find is that more often than not, I'm placing my stand locations, especially for the stands that I'm going to hunt when the rut is now in place, closer to the bedding areas or those areas that I feel like are morning. I'm a morning hunter. I like hunting mornings. And so morning means that I want to be closer to bedding, not messing them up at their feeding areas. I know there's some other people out there that preach they don't even hunt mornings the first month. Through the whole month of October, they're pretty much afternoon only. We don't do that. We're still hunting morning and afternoon. So,
Have we killed any big deer early in the morning in like October?
I could count on one hand how many deer total I've killed in the morning.
You killed, yeah, but that's because you weren't hunting half.
You guys say that in the past 4 or 5 years I hunt.
Yeah,
I mean,
but
that's a lot. That's
I
a
didn't
lot
make
of
fun.
I know, but every time we talk about this, you guys say that. But the past 4 or 5 years has been hunting my ass off.
Well, Brahma was morning.
October 8th. I know you killed
That's
that
the
one in
only
the
one I
morning.
can think of off the top of my head that would be. I think that is. And that was 2016. Was Touch in the morning? Touch was in the evening.
No, that was morning. That
It was?
morning, yeah.
So there's two right there.
Yeah, Touch was in the morning.
I know the past 4 or 5
But that was in
bucks I've killed-
November, I think.
Well,
I'm
his.
saying-
We're talking about mine.
That
Because
was-
I've only killed probably 3 or 4 in the morning.
But let's just say the 1st of October. The first month, or the month of October.
That's ironic that one of my only ones is early in the season.
Super early. So you had, but Touch was in November, I
Touch
think.
was, if it wasn't November, it was late October because he was fired up.
Yeah.
And he had beat
I'm
the
pretty
crap
sure
out
it
of
was
everybody.
November. So you have one. You have, Brahma last year was
October
23rd.
something.
Brahma was 24th, I think. 24th, 25th.
So you got Brahma, Splits.
Splits
but
was
are they
early?
saying, the only thing I will say is if we play devil's advocate here, are they counting the last 10 days of October too?
I don't know.
I wouldn't say that's early season. I'd say you're in it.
You're definitely pre-rut for sure.
I would say anything before, definitely before the 15th is 100%
Early season, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know that I have any that I've killed that early.
But I would say that you don't hunt, early season. You're not going as hard as you are
No, I'm shooting does.
We're shooting
late
does.
October to, yeah.
So our strategy is food. We're sitting food.
The last 10 days of October and the first 3 to 4 days of November, though, I'm usually going pretty hard trying to kill deer. However, I will say Ralph, I saw him, and at that time he had to have been at least 6, I think. And I saw him 3 different times, I think it was. It was 3 times. At least 3 times in the morning before October 22nd. Should have killed him twice. Or almost killed him twice. So I kind of have a hard time with that one. I think in the right scenarios, it can be worth it, especially if you've got them.
Well, there's no way to know
Pattern.
unless you do it, unless you hunt.
Right.
Yeah.
The old tale or the old saying of you can't kill them sitting on the couch.
There you go.
But you can burn out spots. I mean, I get that.
Yeah.
You need to be making sure that you have good access and you're not, running them all over the place.
But I think one of the questions from this gentleman was, how do we pick he was specifically talking about how do we pick a tree, meaning cover and things like that. And I think that's almost a topic of its own because I don't pick a tree. I usually pick a cluster of trees. If I have a choice, meaning if there's 2 trees and one of them is 5 yards in the wrong direction, but there's 2 or 3 trees growing together, that I'm going to pick that tree every single time.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can break up your silhouette.
I can break up my silhouette, and there's always going to be 2 of us in the tree. So I want to have as much cover as I possibly can. One of the things that you brought up earlier too is how much they change. There are times when, not times, every year, the first 2 weeks of the season, you can hardly see, our cameras are dark, and it's 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning, and it's because the canopy's so heavy.
Yeah.
But then by the time you get farther in the season, especially into November, there are no leaves, and all of a sudden you're like a turd in a punch bowl. You're just sitting out there,
Okay, so let's put a little systematicness to this. So how do you first determine an area? And let's say you're trying to kill a buck.
I think we've answered that before, but I can answer it again. And that is, I rely heavily on OnX when I'm first trying to figure out if it's a new place or, but scouting wise, I'm looking for, I love edges. And I don't necessarily mean the edge of a field. I mean like tree line edges. The one that I would think of is where you killed the big deer 2 years ago. That's a perfect edge. That is a
natural funnel
that those deer walk through. And then nowadays I'm putting a rub tree in if I think that it is highly beneficial in that area.
Okay, but what are you looking for? Like, how do you know that this is a spot that I need a stand? Is there a lot of sign? Is there rubs? Is there scrapes? Is there tracks? Is it trails? What is it that you're looking for?
Well, wherever I'm walking through, as long as I know that there's deer there, I'm looking for an optimal location, like a funnel or a reason for them to have to come by if they're coming into that area. If I already know that they're coming into that area, because if I'm walking through somewhere and I can't find any sign or anything, obviously I'm probably going to move on to the next spot. But once I find a spot where I know the deer are at, I'm specifically looking for like whether it's the edge of a creek or the edge of a field. I like fence lines. Or like one of the spots that I really like that they seem to naturally do is I have a big chunk of timber and then there's about 30-yard gap of like there's no food, but it's just like grass, and then a fence line then to the neighbors. Well, they hammer, like it's like that makes a natural trail for them.
That's what that's what I was talking about. And it's a field, it's an edge, but it's not a field edge.
Yeah. And those kinds of things, the whatever I can do to get as close to them as I can to force them to do something naturally, as opposed to like if I'm close to where they're at and trying to rely on grunting them to me or rattling them to me. I don't like that, because that's a lot of reliance on, I don't care to see them. Like if I'm seeing them, that's great and wonderful. And if I'm maybe a new hunter, it keeps me entertained. But I would rather see one deer and it be the right deer and nothing else, and have them within range, than see 100 deer and have them running around everywhere and not be able to be anywhere close. So I'm finding areas that I can somehow funnel them as best as I can possible.
I think for me, as lazy as I am during the summer, I work 2 to 3 times as hard as anybody else during shed season. And that is where I gather 98% of my information, because I walk a lot of miles.
Yeah, you also put a lot of miles on places you don't hunt.
Yeah, but maybe I will at some point.
That doesn't benefit anything.
Oh, I still mark scrapes on theirs.
Trying to find an 80-inch shed.
And it teaches me stuff, though, because I find a lot of things that are consistent, right? Like certain. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it doesn't matter what property I go to. It seems like these types of areas always seem to have a lot of deer, and what I'm looking for there usually is, and then places that we do hunt. I mean, I walk that really heavy, sometimes not even really technically looking for sheds. I mean, I'm looking for sheds. That's my excuse, but at the same time, I'm scouting, and I'm finding I've done that a lot, where especially through bedding areas and stuff that I wouldn't want to walk through at any other time. I'm looking for something that is like, you just know those spots where it's like, oh shit, this is it. You know, there's a big rub every freaking 10 yards, and the trails are beat down to the mud. And one thing I did a lot more during shed season this year was actually marked trees that I knew I could get in with my saddle stuff, because otherwise, is what I learned from last year, was I may have the area distinguished and knew the area that I was going to go target, but getting in a tree in the dark that you could actually shoot from, that without it being a total rodeo, was not that simple. So I needed,
can't cut any of your limbs or anything, or prepare
yeah,
ahead of time.
Yeah, Eli and I ended up in a tree where my furthest shooting lane was like 4.5 yards. I mean, and if you farted, the tree went like, whew. I mean, it was terrible. But it was the only option, and it looked good in the dark. And then it was a butterface. That's what it was. It looked good until the sun got brighter, and then it was bad.
But I'm going to contradict you a little bit. Here's the thing. I think this goes to with what you said, though, a minute ago about if you were hunting a particular deer, because what I find in general is big bucks don't walk those heavy trails. those heavy trails lead me into an area that tell me a lot of deer are coming through there, because I'm not saying that the big buck won't walk down through there, but he won't be on that main trail
I think
Very often.
very often. I'm not saying they will never, but and once the rut goes, then he could be on any trail. I mean, when he's got his nose right to her rear end. But typically what I find is that they're off one way or another. You know, whether they're north or south or east or west, depends on what's running there, which way your trails are running.
Yep.
But I just find that, so a lot of times I find a heavy signed area, got a lot of scrapes, got some rubs, and there's certain kinds of rubs that I'm really looking for. We refer to them as signpost rubs. Other rubs, the little small 1 and 2 inch diameter trees, they don't. There could be 15 of them, and it won't do much for me as far as, ooh, I need to be here.
Yep.
I love finding. One of my favorite things to find is the right fence crossing.
I'll disagree with you on that. I don't care to find small rubs that are, and I'm not even referring to just small rubs, just rubs you can tell that they hit once when they're fired up. It doesn't really benefit me because the chance of them coming back. But I do have areas where if I'm seeing lots of rubs in that area and there's some way to put a stand somewhere close by, unless a buck came through that was just wanting to shred everything, that there's probably multiple deer that are coming through and hitting that.
For
and
sure.
If that's the case, and there's probably deer coming through there pretty consistently. And so I've set stands in areas like that because I am not trying to set up on one tree or one rub or whatever, but I'm setting up in that area because they, for whatever reason, really like that area and they are fired up when they're there or when they're coming through and they're leaving their sign behind. So I like those types of spots.
Well, I should say from when I find an area like that, then the next two things that I'm doing, other than just trying to find a tree, is I am trying to find something that would pinch them down. Ideally, during shed season, I'm trying to find a monster scrape. That's what I'm trying to do. And so I'm trying to find something that's going to pinch them down, and then I'm usually looking at Onyx or looking at the terrain or whatever and seeing, is there a way that I can access this and what's going to be the wind, right? So if predominantly it's a northwest wind most of the time, like where I killed Magnum last year, you could not hunt that with anything other than an east wind. So when I did get an east wind, I went right there because I knew that was going to be probably one of my few opportunities to hunt that, especially in the window that I wanted. I think the most, aside from maybe having one pattern on a food source or something like that, I think that the most consistent, reliable way to kill a big deer is if you can find a scrape in the timber near a bedding area that you can get a daylight picture. If you can get one in like October 20th through the 23rd, man, you're in the money. But if you can find a daylight picture of one, and I'm not talking like right at dusk, like you can get 30, 40 minutes before dark where you know that he's bedding nearby and it's a community scrape that you can access that and be able to get into it without busting them. I think if you have the right wind and you can hunt that every day, do it. And by the 31st of October, the chances of you getting a shot at that deer is really, really, really good.
I would agree with that 100%.
Well, I think the one topic that you just brought up there that I think everything changes is the number one thing when we stand at any tree is wind.
Yep.
I would say that is the one thing that everyone in our family will have in common, and that is, which way is the wind going to blow? Which way is the wind going to blow? This could be the perfect tree. It could be there's a huge scrape there. There's all kinds of rubs. It's leading to the best cornfield, bean field, or food plot that you've got in. Everything is perfect, but you can't. But I've had those locations, and there are some places you cannot hunt. The wind will never, at the bottom of a drainage typically, or two drainages where the wind just swirls all the time.
Oh, yeah. The best one ever was at that North Farm, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we had a stand that we hung that I called Kill Hill, which it was also scary as hell. Looking back, I don't even know how I got that thing hung because the only tree that it worked was this giant cottonwood. But it was, when you were up in the stand, there was this drop off behind you that had to have been 80 to 100 feet.
Oh, yeah, it was a long ways.
I mean, it was a long ways, and I figured there is no way anything's going to be able to win me from here. There was a perfect access point, and it was like prime bedding. Like every deer in the country wanted to go in here. You couldn't be more in the middle of them without being detected. Like it was perfect. So I called it Kill Hill because it was like there's anywhere you're going to kill. And then there was only one spot for these deer to be able to get up into it if they were coming from the east. And then a lot of them came from the west, but the ones came from the east as well. They had to come up this draw. I mean, it was perfect. And when I set that stand up, went and sat that one day in October, and the wind hard. I think maybe you were hunting. I texted somebody else and said, "What's your wind?" And they told me it's hard northwest, and ours was straight east. Right, I thought for sure it'd be going off that cliff, and nothing would ever be able to wind us. And no, it was banking on something or doing something where it swirled, and I mean, it could not have been blowing in a worse place. And so I actually got down at like 8:30 or something.
We actually ended up eventually pulling that stand because
I pulled it that morning.
There was no way to hunt it that the wind was never going to be right.
Yep.
And so be conscious of that when you are setting your stands, is that certain areas, and now that can work in your benefit though too, because there's certain areas where it would be blowing in the right direction, and it'll always blow in the right direction.
Yep.
I will say that I have a question at the end of this, thinking about this. But if I'm hunting somewhere that I've hunted for a while and I have stands other places, when I find an area that I want to put a stand, a lot of times I'll try to think of what all my other stand wins are and what I'm lacking, so basically what I'm doing is finding which ones I don't have wins for,
giving yourself opportunity.
Because I've found that when I first started hunting a new place, I was just putting up stands where I knew was a good area. I could hunt it with a specific wind, but then I ended up coming to find out, I'm like, well, crap, I have 7 stands, and they're all
for the same
remotely the same wind or the same wind. So now when you get the wrong wind, you can't hunt. And because I'm not going to go in there just to blow a bunch of deer out of there. So you got to find somewhere else to go, or you got to do something else. So I'll divvy up, try to give myself options, basically, with dependent on the wind, if I'm in a spot that I've hunted for a while and I have other stands out. But my question with that is because I had it last year where one of my rub posts was that they were coming during the daylight. Every single buck that I possibly could have in there was hammering that during daylight. And I had a blind on it like 30 yards away. We couldn't hunt it. Or come to find out, we hunted it. Me and Warren hunted it 2 or 3 times, and no deer would show up. We couldn't figure out why. Well, then Warren's like, well, did you check the thermals? I was like, I haven't. Come to find out, the thermals were completely screwing us. Is there a way to, in that situation, the way that one was at, it was by a creek and it was in a bottom, and you could tell which way the thermals were going. And the only way I could see to combat that would be we needed to get away from it, up the hill a little ways, but then we couldn't shoot the rub post, which was okay if they're coming to that spot anyways, but there wasn't a great area to be able to even catch them to or from. Or can you get high enough? And I don't know if that's because I do have a spot now that I'm thinking of where I just planted this new little food plot. I just started thinking while you guys are talking about that, my blind is going to be useless in there, guarantee it, because I know anytime I don't have a strong wind, or possibly even when I do have a strong wind, it's right next to a creek, it's in a bottom, and there's lots of trees. So I doubt that this tough wind is going to get through there. I'm probably going to be hunting a thermal the entire time, and that's going to be probably one of those situations where it's going to be consistent all the time. So do you find a spot where you got to get away from it or find near it, or do you think you can get into a stand where maybe instead of being 15 or 20 feet up, you're 30 feet up, that it's going to at least blow over them? Or do your thermals even affect you when you get that high?
I have another question too after that.
Well, so to answer your question, I used to hunt 40 feet. I used to climb the end of a 40-foot rope. That when I lived in Arkansas, that was but ours wasn't necessarily for the wind. Ours was more because the deer walked around looking up in the trees. Because I was hunting public ground, a lot of people were hunting them, and it was flat. And so they could see, and so you hunted high. Did we get over them?
The owl method.
I don't know. I wasn't the only. That was just the way everyone was doing it, and we were hunting out of climbers. You couldn't leave anything in the trees and stuff like that. So can you get above them? I think there is the possibility of getting above them. But I find that Iowa's tough because of the rolling hills, and that you're still going to get, if the wind is swirling, if you're hunting thermals and they're following a certain deal, they're going to work their way down to the ground.
If it's before November 1 too. There's way too much. There's too much leaves and everything on the trees. There's no way that you can get 40 feet and be able to shoot
No,
anywhere.
there's nowhere around here that
No.
you're going to get that high.
Yeah,
Even 30 feet, I think, would be tough
yeah.
in
But
most
I
places.
do know that like there's been certain spots, not including not talking about the wind specifically, but speaking of height, that I know I can't. I know I'm not going to be able to have enough cover. The one that I think of is in the bottom where Joey passed Elway.
Mhm.
The stand I moved that to is where it needed to be, but it was a telephone pole. And I mean, it's in the trees, but it's a big tree. There's not a limb on it anywhere. And so I was like, okay, I don't have really anywhere else to try, so I'm just going to try to go higher and see if I can at least stay out of their line of view. And it worked. And I was honestly expecting to sit in that stand and be busted left and right, but I was just going to do it once or twice and see if I could get away with it. And I did stand still there because I think I was high enough that I didn't necessarily need as much cover. So, but I don't like to be that high because it just makes a shot difficult
Right.
or more difficult.
Yeah, I've had two actually that now that I think about it, that I hung that were way, way too high. I mean, they were probably 35 feet. But the reason I did that is because it was on a hill.
Yeah,
where-
one side is you're level with them. The other
Yes.
side, you're well above them.
So my next question then is, during the summer, do you think the thermals change? Like, could you go out there in the evening right now and when the wind dies and check the thermals? Surely it would be different, right? Because your temperatures are so much different.
But I don't think, like, lately, as humid as it is, I think that the moisture in the air is
It's
so
sit.
heavy. Yeah, I mean, it'd be tough to hunt when it's this hot and this humid. I mean, no different than.
So yes, the thermals would be different.
Yeah, I think that they can be
Okay.
for sure.
But it's humid during season too. It's
Not-
just cooler.
For the first week or two, or
Yeah, I
maybe
mean-
3 weeks.
You just have to watch the wind. I mean, because at the same time, though,
so you
a
can't
10 mile
really
an hour-
pre-scout that is what I'm saying.
to an extent, but you're going to have
I
to
think
take
you could
some.
also, though,
During
think
shed
about
season,
it.
maybe.
I mean, like a creek is going to be, your water's going to pull your thermals.
Yep.
So you would know at least some of them that if there's a water source and it's running down the ridge or whatever, it's probably going to go that way.
Yeah, if you have a river or something that creates that cool air effect, because like I said, the same farm you're talking about, Mom and I hunted the stand. Actually, it had multiple things we've talked about. I put the stand really, really high, so high that she couldn't shoot behind us. And because we actually had a buck walk by at like 30 yards, and I would have sworn he was 50. I mean, that's how high this, but we were dead level with them on the other side. That's how steep the ridge was. And we hunted it twice, and eventually I had to pull the stand because I think I texted you and said, which way is your wind blowing today? Because I got a southeast wind, which is blowing right to where they were coming across the river to get to us. And I was like, and it was supposed to be a hard northwest wind. And you said, we have a northwest wind, and it's blowing hard. It's cold. And so anyhow, I had to pull that stand. So that one was, but I've had it work in my favor where you could find a location, and it's always going to do that as well. So like I said, I mean, the wind is crucial. Choosing stand locations when it comes to choosing trees, like you talked about, a big tree. We're not big tree people.
I hate big trees.
I don't like them. I don't like them for several reasons. One, we can't communicate with our cameraman, but main reason is I don't like hanging stands in trees that I can't put my arms all the way around.
Pretty easily.
Yes, I mean,
I just don't like them for the fact of getting a stand in it.
that's what I'm
But
saying.
I do like if I'm up in one, because for as far as the camera guy goes, I just set him next to me. Like I might not put it on the opposite side of the tree like I normally would, and it might cut off some filming. But I like a big tree because I can sit against that and not have parts of my body sitting around.
I think it
Giving
cuts
me
off
a
some
silhouette.
shooting though too.
I think it probably does too. Maybe it's a sense of security too. I have no issue with heights, but I do like a large tree for whatever reason.
See, I don't.
But side tip, because I think there's a lot of guys that I've known, quite a few. Actually, Eli would be one of them, that don't use rangefinders or don't want to use rangefinders or don't want to buy one. If you get in any of these situations, I will tell you right now that I don't care how good you are at judging yardage, because we practice that pretty religiously during the summers. Like especially like when me and Warren go and shoot 3D ranges and stuff, we'll purposely go shoot them without a rangefinder at all. and we're still scoring to shoot to see how well our yardage is on or off. And like the other day, we went and we're like, oh boy, we need to be practicing again because we're rusty. But my point with that is I had to stand the same thing. I could have sworn because I had a doe. It was the first time I sat in this stand. It was right on the edge of basically a cliff. I mean, it's pretty much straight down. And there's a trail down the hill that I know they're going to walk in, but I was mainly hunting the top side of the hill because it's bedding. And that doe came by, and I was like, man, that is a little doe, like a really little doe. And I was like, oh, maybe she's just a long ways away. So I, just for fun, I grabbed not fun, for practice, I grabbed my bow, and I'm looking, and I'm like, okay, if I didn't have my rangefinder, I'm going to judge this for like 55 or 60 yards. And then I ranged it to see as well, and it was 33 freaking yards. But when I was looking, it's because I think on that one I did get to full draw, because sometimes I'll practice. I think it's a good thing to practice when, like, if you have deer coming through and stuff, practice getting to full draw and things like that, not to get busted. But I looked and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like the difficulty of a 60 or 70 yard shot, because my pin in the deer looks so freaking little that, I mean, it's going to make the shot much more difficult. So keep that in mind, for one, as far as your ability to make those kinds of shots, because it does make a difference when they're that far and it's that steep. You have a lot smaller of an area to hit, and it feels like a lot further. And number two, I highly recommend getting a rangefinder, because you're probably going to end up, even if you were comfortable with that shot and you did judge it for 50 or 60 yards and you go to shoot it for that, your arrow is going to go about 10 feet over its back, and you're not going to know why. So it's deceiving a lot of times. No matter how much you practice with things like that, you can't particularly tell the angle. And even if it's a cheap one, go invest in a rangefinder.
Oh, yeah, I carry a rangefinder everywhere I go.
And everybody that talks about like the accuracy of them, as long as you sight your bow into, and it's consistent, I will say that, as long as your rangefinder is consistent. But if you sight your bow into whatever your rangefinder was telling you, and you're using the same one, it's not going to matter if it's 5 yards different than his when he's sitting next to me, as long as I'm not going off his yardage. I'm going off mine. So
I would tell you, if you're one of these guys doing this heavy arrow train, your arrows are like 550, 600, 650, you should probably buy a pretty expensive rangefinder.
Yeah.
Because you don't have much.
Yeah, you'd have
unless your draw length's 31.
The 5 yard difference is going to be a huge
difference.
difference.
You better not. Even 2 yards could be a problem.
What do you think
past
is
30, something like that?
Let's just all three answer this question, because I guarantee that what we've talked about now will create that question for someone, and I think we should just answer it. What is the average height that you're putting a stand?
Somewhere around 17 to 20 feet.
What would you say?
16, 17.
The number that I had in my head was 17 feet, because I'm 15 to 20.
Yeah.
I do
17,
like to
18.
be a little over 20, but I find that a lot of our trees, you have so many branches, or there's a Y, or there's this or that I've found. Like I even have a couple stands that are like 12 or 13 feet off the ground.
Oh, yeah.
I hate them, but they
Well, I
work
think-
because I have enough cover too.
Well, we
yeah.
had a stand that we called Shorty.
Yeah, that
and
one
they-
you could pretty much just hang off the stand and you touch the ground.
It was about 9 feet, 8 or 9 feet, because you could jump up and grab the
Yeah.
platform, but you could hand people their bow if they were getting in the stand. But we
But
never
there
got
was
busted.
multiple trees there. That was like another little cluster. They all
Absolutely.
split up, and you had cover, and it got you elevated a little bit in order to see more and shoot better.
Yep.
I think there's different elements that I think people overlook. They get busted and they think it's because they're not high enough, but they won't consider the fact that, one, they're not taking into consideration which direction the deer are coming from, or the deer comes from a direction they're not ready for, and they're skylined. So, two, they're out from the tree. So if you're in a hang-on or a ladder stand, which one, I'll tell you too, I hate ladder stands. I truly
I've
believe
hopped on that train with you. I can't stand them.
I truly believe that deer, especially when they walk by them enough, they learn, not necessarily that they learn what a ladder stand is, but just the fact that the ladder is such straight lines that it is abnormal in the woods. And so a deer looks at that and they just follow it up. Same reason that your roads have, a white line on each side and your yellow stripes in the middle, because your eyes follow that. It's natural. And I've had lots of does bust me before, because they'll be walking by and then they'll see this two perfect lines, and then their head just goes bloop, and they're like, oh my God, there's a gorilla. And they freak out.
As much as that part makes sense, I don't know how. I mean,
I
feel like
video
that's
of
giving
some.
them a lot of credit. Well, see, I think the reason that I don't like ladders is because I can't get to the tree. I can't. I
a lot of ladders
physically-
now are made where you can.
Some of them.
I'm
Some of
not
them you
saying-
can flip the chair up, but other than that, I mean, you're pretty much 1.5 2 feet out from the tree,
From
no
the
matter
tree.
what.
I'll try
I
and find
hate
the
that,
video at Gobbler Knob
because
because
you
it's
just followed it.
I'm not giving them that much credit. I'm
But I
just saying
feel like
that,
I've also had some do that with my sticks.
yeah, I don't know.
But I think that's solely from the fact of I've been busted in that tree multiple times.
Well, these
So
deer,
they-
this deer was literally just walking along, meandering along, and then like kind of looked up, and then just its eyes just followed it up. And I don't think it had any indication of anything. It was just a natural thing for it to look and follow up that ladder.
Yeah.
But one thing that I think that, because I don't agree with you guys, I like ladders, and I think that if it's the right ladder, meaning a ladder that the platform goes all the way to the tree,
Or
so
at
that
least
you
close.
can because that is a technique that we will do a lot of times is lean against the tree.
I'm always against the tree.
Right, especially if you see the deer coming, bow's in your hand, and then you lean against the tree. And someone's like, why would you do that? Well, because it seems like you become part of that tree. It's hard for them to differentiate then the outline of something, and stay leaned against it until you see that
Also,
there's an
it
opportunity.
depends. Like if they're coming from your side and you're not next to the tree, there's a gap. You
Yeah,
just
you're
gave yourself
silhouetted.
a silhouette.
Right.
And that's the main thing. The
Okay.
main thing you got to get rid of is a silhouette.
Okay, but then the other part that Warren's talking about, where I agree with him, is especially if you have like a ladder that drops down into a logging road or into a field where they can easily identify those two straight lines going up, where I don't find that you have near as much of an issue putting a ladder in the timber. It seems like there's enough other things out there moving around and that they don't pick up on it. Or sometimes we'll run a ladder and you have brush at the bottom, so they don't even see it until it gets 6-7 feet up.
Yeah. Well, the main thing that another point to that is one of the main things I pay attention to, because we have so many rolling hills and everything. So if you have somewhere where you're hunting that's really flat, it doesn't really pertain to you. It would more pertain to finding things that are in your background, so that for whatever level that the deer are at and they look up, if they were to look up, they're not going to just see a figure
Right.
standing in a tree. But a big one that I like to hunt on edges of hills or on like in little valleys or areas that are funnels. And if you're not careful, if you're not on the top, mainly if you're not on the top, actually it's the only way you really eliminate it. If you're down below them somewhere, like where they're coming off of a hill and they got to walk down towards you, even if they're a little ways away, if they have any sake of easiness to look down at you, to walk off a hill where they're level with you or anything like that, I hate it. Because if you do not play that perfectly and sit completely still and they have no idea, they don't catch any wind, they don't get nervous, nothing, you might be all right. But if they do catch any sort of anything, it is the easiest thing for them to literally just look at you. So keep it in mind that if you're hunting hills or you're hunting areas where they're going to be elevated above you, you better pay attention. And even when I have areas where I'm looking into the bottom, like that's where I'm expecting them to come from, I will still spend probably 90% of my time facing up the hill, looking at the
That's
hill,
where you could get busted from.
because I need to be prepared for the most amount of time possible if they do pop up there, because I'm going to sit, and a lot of times I'll even just stay sitting or something, or stay against a tree, and I don't make a move to grab a bow or anything until they get to me or by me, because I'm not risking, it's too easy for them to see that.
Right.
So let's just say then, what do you do when it's the right spot and the only tree that's available is just butt naked? Are you still putting a stand there?
No, I have. Well, I guess there's a couple questions I have in my head. Number one would be, is it like you're out in the open, like in a field kind of thing, or is there trees around and it's just one bare tree? Because the thing that goes in my head right away is I would much rather, if I'm somewhere near timber at least, I'm putting a blind in somewhere.
Say,
I'm going to
can
brush
you get a blind
in
in it?
No blind, very few trees. The one tree that works is kind of on an island.
Well, if that's your only place to hunt, I'm throwing a tree. I mean, you don't have a choice.
So you're going to sit it still.
What else are you supposed to do if you don't have anywhere else to hunt?
Well, I'm saying that you have other places, but you just know that that's the spot. Are you going to risk it and hunt that or not?
If that's the only way I can hunt that, unless the only other thing I would do is if I could get, even if it's 100 yards away, if I can get somewhere in the general vicinity for a better stand, I would do that. But if my hands are tied, I'll risk it. especially if you're one of these guys listening that doesn't hunt with a buddy or something. I mean, if you're hunting alone,
I would have to see that situation.
I'm sitting it.
I might not. I'm not. I just feel like I know I've walked away from some really good spots.
I'm sitting it because of two reasons. One, I think when you do the mobile stuff, you can get away with a lot more on first sits.
Yep.
You know, because those deer don't get near as educated. Two, I think that you can get away with a lot more than you think in the right situations. What I mean by that is I'm going to be looking and trying to figure out where I believe the majority of those deer come from. If let's just say, that north and south is where most of the deer are going to come from, then I'm going to set up that stand facing south. Okay.
So you have a tree in between you.
Yes, and then I'm going to make sure that I'm
with your
standing
saddle?
either one. And with this saddle, too, I'm going to tell you guys I'm not leaning against the saddle. I'm going to either turn around and lean against the tree, or I'm going to pull that rope up where I'm leaning against the tree.
So you're standing straight up.
Yes,
yeah.
because I think that when you lean off the tree like that, if there's not much around, you're going to get busted. They're going to see that. Where if let's just say you're in a stand, you can sit there, and if you're right in line with that tree, you can get away with a lot more than you think.
Oh, yeah.
And then I think a lot of times, too, if you have a tree like that, especially if you have one where it's got good cover and you're getting busted, it's time to move the stand. When those deer go and they pick it out, because you'd be amazed how many spots you can go and sit in fresh, and you don't have to be that far off the ground or anything, and you can, as long as you're not moving and you're in line with that tree, you're okay. All right, Nick, zoom in. I've got it. So we did this with Bryce. So that is sitting, Bryce here is off the platform, like really probably only a foot, maybe 14 inches. Can you see that well? Okay. And then that's against the tree.
Yeah, that makes a big difference.
Makes a huge difference.
Huge difference. Huge difference. So I would be trying to line myself up where those deer are able to walk at me, and that I'm in line with it. And then the other thing I think that happens there is sometimes too, I'll have them, they'll still see you. They'll look up and they'll still see that there's definitely something there, but they're going to look at you for a minute or two, and every once in a while you might have one freak out. But most of the time, if you're in line with the tree like that, they're like, and you don't move, they're like, oh, okay, it's just that tree's got a weird lump.
Well, with a saddle, I would do that, because then you're facing the direction you think that they're going to be coming, and you have the tree in between you, and you can shoot both sides of that. I would flip that, though, if I had my regular hang-on stand. Dad always says it with elk, trust your camo. I would be in front of the tree, but I'd still try to be directly facing them, so that with my stand, I can still shoot everything. I can see where they're coming from and everything, but I have a perfect background or backdrop of the tree. And so I can sit against that, and it's doing me pretty much the same purpose of being behind the tree, except for the fact that you just don't move too much. Sit there, sit still, you can get away with it, and you're going to feel vulnerable, but you got to trust that you're going to blend in with that tree. And as long as there's not a whole bunch of lines leading right to you, or you can see the outline of your arms and everything else, you're fine. And so with a hang-on, I'm doing it on that side. With the saddle, I'm on the same side as you.
Well, I think there's a lot to be said for how you hunt a tree stand, too. If you're one of these people that's sitting up there flailing around all the time, playing games on your phone, doing stuff, not paying attention, you're going to get busted. If you're someone who's just not comfortable, and so you're constantly standing up, sitting down, standing up, sitting down. I mean, I hunted years without a seat. One was because they didn't make them. I mean, and then two, eventually, even when they made them, I just didn't sit down. I stood the whole time.
You're a freak, though.
But I stood against a tree.
He will stand for 24 hours.
Yeah, like you're a super freak, because I can't do what you do. I had no way I could do that.
You go whole entire sits without sitting down.
Yeah, this
Not
dude,
anymore,
for people listening, this dude will sit there.
24 hours is an exaggeration, but like a full sit. I mean, he will literally.
Yeah, he'll stand the entire time and he will not move. Just slowly looking around. That's it.
Well, I mean, you got to think the whole time I'm sitting there, I'm thinking that I'm in the right spot and they're coming.
No, I'm sitting down.
That's a big part of the reason I'm in the freaking saddle, is because it gives me the ability to swing around like George of the Jungle and keeps me entertained.
There's your flailing around.
Yeah. Well, it goes from you dangling. We're back to dangling again. Gotten older, and now we're dangling. But I do have things to say about the saddle stuff that I'm a fan. I mean, last year, the couple times that I did it with you and with him, I mean, I think if you get the right situation, I could see me using it, and saying, let's move into this spot and be there once, see how it goes, and then, but I sure like the fact of kind of banking on things too and already having stuff set where you just walk in and climb in.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely times where I think it's beneficial to not have to set stuff up.
Absolutely. But that means you got to do a lot more education, because once you commit, especially for us, 2 stands committed and everything to get all that in there, we're committed to it.
That's the only other thing I think that we probably should touch on is I think that one thing that I think all of us do a terrible job at, and we should probably do a lot more, is observation stands. A few times I've forced myself to do those. Those have been really beneficial.
What Warren's referring to is basically putting in a stand in a location not necessarily where you expect to kill something, but where you can see deer coming in and out of a food plot or in and out of a field or even
observe.
Yeah, even in the timber, there's places it's very difficult to do that in the timber in October or early October because you can't see very far.
I had that for the first time. I was like, oh, I was telling Joey we should put a stand right here. I have no idea where it needs to be, but let's just put it out right here out of the way, and we'll get pretty high, and we can see, just sit for a couple times and see what they're doing. We'll come to find out, I have a camera there now. I'm like, no, I'm not putting an observation stand in there. I'm putting a stand in there to shoot something because they're
using it.
Yeah.
Right.
But,
so, no, observation stands, and I've done it in Virginia, I did it in Montana, I've done it here in Iowa. I mean, it can be fantastic. And a lot of times it doesn't necessarily have to be a stand. It could be a blind out on a food plot, and you just watch and see where the deer are going in and out of, and then you move in on them.
Yeah.
Especially if you're getting trail camera photos of bucks that are getting there, but they're getting there after dark. You might be able to move into the timber and catch them before it gets early, before it gets too late.
I feel like we have completely overloaded.
Oh, yeah, we gave someone a lot of information, but there's a lot of information.
I mean,
guarantee you though too, there's several things we haven't even touched.
Yeah, I mean, but to summarize, so the main point is give yourself the best opportunity not to be seen, no matter what the stand is. Don't like. I guess my point would be don't restrict yourself to I have to be 17 feet, I have to be 14 feet, I have to be 30 feet. Whatever the situation is, play the situation and where the lay of the land is. And so if you have a cluster of trees and you can't get as high, it's probably going to be okay if you're a little lower in your stand. If you're in somewhere where it's a really bare tree, but you're maybe you want to be a little higher, like play it where the most opportunity of where your deer are coming from or going to are not going to be able to see you as well. So that comes down to even like depending on the type of tree you pick or even which way you're facing your stand is going to make huge differences. Because like with what he was saying, if you go off to one side or the other, you're exactly what that picture just shows. You're going to be a massive silhouette from the direction that they're probably going to be coming from. So play the role of which way you think the majority of them are. And the other tip I would say, if you have spots where they're coming from everywhere, you got to pick. You either got to move out, like get further away, or you got to pick where you're more comfortable with them coming from, or you have the best ability to shoot where they're coming from, and just play the wind as I know I'm going to cut these off. Because I have multiple stands like that where I'm like, I think that they come from everywhere. Well, you can't hunt a wind with everywhere. You got to, or a stand. So hunt the spot that either move away from it or hunt that spot specifically in one area.
September, October, too. Don't cut too many shooting lanes.
Because
you might end up being bare naked before you know it.
Yep.
But I think I agree with what you just said about, how to pick from visibility, pick something that can be lower if it's more cover, higher if it's less cover. But more than anything, pick the wind direction that is going to most be beneficial for you. And that goes into, and then understand that when you hit the rut, I don't care where you think your deer are coming from or where they're going to, it kind of all goes out the window at that time. You can have a buck coming from the best food source at 3:00 in the afternoon because you aren't expecting them to come from that direction. They're supposed to be going to it, but they're already there.
Yeah, that's when your funnels can really help you out because it kind of forces them to you. Yep.
Well, I agree with Easton. I think we've kind of overloaded maybe or given you too much information, but at the same time, keep sending in the comments because I can think of a few things that we didn't cover, but we just don't want to make these too long. We sure appreciate you guys sending in the reviews, sending in the asks on for certain topics.
If you have sent a topic in and we haven't done it, there's a good chance that I've missed writing it down. So don't feel like we're ignoring. Maybe just keep
Or it's on
sending
the
it.
roster.
Yeah, shoot it in again.
I may have it like already written down, but I know that I've missed a couple in the past week or two that I don't know how to find them again. So if that's you, I'm sorry, and just write in again.
All right, Warren's wild fact.
All right.
That's Warren's wacky
fact. You don't even
Wacky
remember what it's
fact.
called.
The average person spends a year and a half of their lifetime on the toilet.
Taking a dump or peeing?
Well, females, I guess, a little bit longer, but that's just what it says, a year and a half. You are at that mark already.
I'm past that.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah, you're going to be 4 or 5 times average.
I'm a
Congrats. You're an
long ways past
overachiever on that.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of employees that do that too because they think,
Hourly.
I'm getting paid to shit.
Mm-hmm. Give you a dime.
That's just
for your
it.
time.
That's your fact. You're just throwing that out there. There's no question in it.
Poop quicker,
Isn't
man,
it
and
just
get
amazing
a
that
year and a half
We
back.
spend that much of our life sitting on the toilet.
I wonder what average time would be per poop.
I don't know.
For
Because
some
I've
people.
got to be over it.
Oh, yeah.
I'm way under.
You're like
I
47
have
minutes.
more time to do other things because in my lifetime, if it's a year and a half, I'm only going to use about 6 months of that. So I get another year to do stuff because I believe in pooping fast and going on.
The only time that I don't care who you are, it ain't going to work that way, is if you got to take a crap in the woods.
Yep.
Guaranteed
you are
you're gonna need a whole
guaranteed a
roll.
long time.
It's
And
just,
be careful what leaves you use.
It's
What?
just Mother Nature laughing at you.
Whatever. All right. Well, we're going to on that wacky fact, and it was a gross fact, but we'll take it, I guess.
It's a fact. It's just
Whatever.
way of the world.
All right. We're going to get out of here. So from the Raised Hunting crew, we sure appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.